Hello, everybody. This is Tali Berman, autism specialist and author, here with.
Hi, Roni, Enten, individualized biomedical nutritionist.
And we are here together. We are now on video 2 of our sort of picky eating deep dive series. This is video 2. Video 1 really focused on identifying root causes for picky eating, the 3 root causes we discussed. And so the link to video number 1 will be posted below in case you didn't see that video. It's very important to watch that video first, because that video will first help you really identify how to begin the process and move forward in a very targeted way. And today's video is going to be more about tips to really help. I liked how you titled it. Let me just see it again. Practical tips for improving pickiness, right? So now that we've sort of identified a little bit further what might be going on for your child, we're going to talk about the tips to help improve the pickiness. And we're going to start first with some of the testing. Some of the testing, because we talked a little bit about in the first video, medical issues, underlying medical issues being one of the main, or the first root cause that we want to address. And sometimes you can see that symptomatically based on a child, either they have chronic diarrhea or chronic constipation or whatever. But testing sometimes needs to be done to identify if there are underlying medical issues that aren't so obvious and observable to the eye. So Roni, can we start by just sort of mentioning, I know it's very unique to each child, and in our work we do together, we will work with families to identify which tests are the best one for that particular child. But are there a couple that you see to be the most common or the most helpful in identifying underlying medical issues?
Yeah, definitely. If I were to speak about them in general, I think stool testing a lot of times can be helpful in trying to figure out if there's something underlying going on in the gut. Sometimes those symptoms are obvious and sometimes they're not. So as a baseline test, that can be helpful to kind of piece things together.
What kinds of information can a stool test give you?
A stool test can give a lot of information. It gives us info on bacteria, good bacteria, beneficial and dysbiotic, unwanted bacteria.
Mm-hmm.
It gives us information on whether there's parasites that can be affecting pickiness or the way a child feels in the gut, yeast sometimes. And then digestive markers like absorption, enzymes, if there's inflammation going on. So a lot of different stuff. Very helpful.
Right.
Yeah. The next one I want to mention is probably the specialized food allergy testing. This is not always appropriate to do, but a lot of families will choose to do this at some point, and it does help to give some direction about whether there's an immune reaction going on if a child is allergic to certain foods that we're not aware of. So that's an interesting one and can definitely affect food choices and pickiness.
Is that a blood test?
Yes.
Mm-hmm. So it's a blood test that then will give you analysis of where your child might have allergies.
That's right. And in addition to that, minerals can be tested for in the blood as well. And we talked about that in the first video, how sometimes an insufficiency of a mineral can impact a child's food choices.
And what's so interesting about these tests, I just want to mention, because we're talking about it in the context of identifying what might be contributing to your child's picky eating, right? So any kind of discomfort, any allergy to a food might make them completely resistant to certain foods, understandably so, or might just give them an overall experience of discomfort, which just might make eating less attractive to them, right? So we're talking about the context of picky eating, but it's so interesting also that as we begin to identify allergens and can eliminate those allergies or those allergic triggers, then that affects so much more than your child's picky eating. I mean, that affects like mood and sleep. And, I remember a family I was working with, and it was some very obscure allergies that they had no idea about. It was like onion, which was sort of in everything that was affecting their mood, affecting their attention span. And so besides the picky eating side, it also gives you so much more information that can help overall development, which is can be so exciting to discover.
Absolutely. I also want to mention, if we're talking about food allergies, that there's food sensitivities, and that is a little bit harder to identify. One of the classic ways to do that, though, is using an allergy or a food sensitivity elimination diet. And so that gives us sometimes a clearer picture, even than testing, of if there's a reaction going on to a certain food, or if there's a certain food category that should be eliminated. And that definitely can be done with the help of a nutritionist.
Okay, where you eliminate a food, sort of see what's going on with your child, and reintroduce it and see what's
That's right. In an organized way. That's right.
Right. Right. So was there any other tests you wanted to mention besides those two?
I think those are probably the main ones that I want to mention today without getting into too much detail, but it is very individualized. I think that's a good starting place, though, good starting point.
Right. And again, I think it's just a huge energy saver, even though it takes time to do these testing, because otherwise you're working against a very strong current your whole time trying to address picky eating. If you're working against underlying medical issue that isn't identified and treated, I feel for you as parents who really worked hard to do that and with little results because the underlying medical issue hasn't been treated. So this, I
That's
just want
right.
to really, really strongly urge anyone who hasn't done that, really take the time to explore that through different testing to identify what might be contributing to your child's picky eating that you might not be able to address unless you really target those underlying medical issues.
That's right. That's right. And I urge people, if they haven't seen the first video, to go back and listen to that information because there's testing that's more medically oriented for different kinds of, let's say, gastrointestinal problems, for example, reflux, that's a little bit beyond what a nutritionist will do, but a doctor can help to identify those.
Right, right. And so having that testing, let's say, done, and let's say there are some medical issues, those medical issues are being treated or in the process of being treated, which of course you could do with a nutritionist. That's definitely a big part of what we do as a whole child team. What are some strategies or tips, Roni, beyond that you want to offer to help improve?
Yeah, so again, if we've looked at all of those and we know we're dealing with a basic picky eater, there's definitely different ways that we can help to address those problems and help to expand their eating choices. So I like to look at the where, when, and the who to begin with, and I'll start with the where. So where is the child eating? What's the mealtime environment like? I think this is important to look at. So what's the table like? What's the chair like that your child is sitting in? Is your child comfortable? If it's a little child, do they need a booster seat to help get up and feel comfortable at the table? What kind of plate and cup are they using? Do they need a certain kind of cup, a sippy cup or an open cup? What's the plate size? Is their fork comfortable to use? I mean, these are all things that can affect a child's willingness to sit down and feel comfortable at the table and eat.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
so,
and also I just want to add to that, the backdrop, so for example, what kind of is it a hectic environment? Is there a TV on? Are the kids running around? Is it just sort of an impossible environment for your child to feel relaxed and open enough to do something that's challenging for him? Or, is the environment one that is sort of calm and organized and is really setting your child up to take advantage of his mealtime?
Absolutely. Definitely. That's an important point as well. And that can affect kids that are sensorily sensitive, having, sensory sensitivities.
Mm-hmm.
In addition to that, I think it's just important to let a child feel comfortable with food and be able to touch and explore and be able to get messy in certain cases. To really let them feel comfortable, to help relieve any anxiety if there is any surrounding mealtime, and to have fun. So making sure that it's a fun environment, I think, is important to remember as well.
Mm-hmm.
In terms of the when, I mentioned the when. I've noticed that with a lot of the families that I work with, sometimes meals are being offered when a child is, for example, a little bit too tired. It's not really their timing. And if we move mealtime up or down, an hour before, an hour later, it can really help a child to eat better or be more willing to try new foods, just be in a better mood when they come sit down. So something to think about, something to explore there. And in addition to that, as it relates to timing, the when is a child having their previous snack? If kids are grazing a lot of the time leading up to meals, or if they've had a big snack, or they're too hungry when they get to a meal, they haven't had a good enough snack in the several hours leading up to a meal, that can also affect their pickiness, their selectivity, their willingness to eat. So these are things that are also important to pay attention to and can easily be shifted and have a big impact.
Right.
Okay. And in terms of the who, I love to talk about family meals. A lot of times kids are sitting down by themselves or, with one parent who's not eating, not in the context of family. I always try to remind parents, sit down, enjoy food with your child, try to model enjoyable eating, healthy eating with your child. But a lot of times has a huge impact also on a child's willingness to eat new foods or eat healthy foods. I know you've seen that a lot, Tali, as well.
And what?
I know you've seen that as well, Tali, in your work.
Yeah. I think there's also been a lot of pressure around You know, everyone's sort of watching the kid who's sitting by himself and eating foods, and it just adds to sort of a high pressure environment where there already might be a level of stress. Then like everyone's sort of staying together and having that meal together.
Yeah, absolutely. So,
Also, when we were talking just before that, you were talking a little bit about the importance of really giving a child exposure and kind of the amount that you might even start with and that sort of journey that it might require. Just wanted to see if you could talk a little bit about that as a way to help them.
yeah. And I think this kind of relates to the environment, but portions really important. If you're dealing with a very young child, sometimes putting too much on the plate can be very overwhelming. So starting with the right size spoon or fork and very small bites to reduce anxiety and working up from there. In addition to that, having lots of patience and remembering that sometimes foods need to be introduced lots and lots of times before a child is willing to explore it.
Yeah, and I know that we are working with a family who is really was we're helping them with picky eating, and that was really a big strategy that was very helpful to them. Is they would have like a food of the week, where there was that one food they were introducing all week long, in a very small portion, like a tablespoon's worth of that portion of food every day for a week, sometimes even 2 weeks, because a child sometimes really needs that ample and repeated exposure to the same food until they're a little bit more comfortable, a little bit more familiar, and they're willing to try it. So sometimes I think parents just sort of stop too soon, give it a couple of days, or try to get them to eat too much at one time. And I remember another family I'm working with was saying that her daughter would eat like the size of what a gerbil would eat, let's say, of a particular vegetable, but that's how it started until she was able to really eat and enjoy a full plate of a variety of vegetables. But don't get discouraged if it starts with like a tablespoon's worth of peas, right? Or even a teaspoon worth of peas, because it's a process and it will build and expand with time. So just be aware and be careful of not pulling out too soon, not giving up too quickly.
That's right. Got to remember what it was like to start feeding babies. We got to go really slow with a lot of patience. Yeah, absolutely. I agree, Tali.
So is there anything else you want to add, Roni, in terms of strategies and tips for expanding pickiness?
There's so many strategies I think it's important to mention. And again, it's like everything else that I talk about over and over, it's very individualized. But I think that starting kind of to look at it as the where, when, who is a good starting point and going from there.
Excellent. All right, so that wraps up video 2. And so this is the way the series has sort of been built out. Video 1 was more about identifying underlying root causes. And video 2, which was today, is strategies and tips for helping to expand a child's diet. And the next video we're going to talk about is enriching the nutrition of a particular child. So parents have concerns of, even as they're expanding, it's not a full range diet, is he getting what he needs? How can we enrich his diet to make sure that though he might be a more restrictive eater, he's getting what he needs for his healthy development? So we're going to talk about that in the next video. And as always, if you have any questions or comments, feel free to join the conversation below, and we would love to engage with you. So
absolutely.
We will see you in the next video. Take care.
Bye-bye, everyone.
Bye.